I know this is a bumper, but it was too dark to see the...
Oh, thank God. Welcome back to Expressing My Thoughts, the show where I take a look at the weirdest pieces of media and give my general critique on them. Don't you hate when this happens? Look, I don't want to bog down this intro with a very long story or anything, so to give the phrase long story short an actual meaning, I basically had to show myself out. I mean, it worked, I managed to get the Nellie Leroy costume that I've always wanted, but at what cost? It's a completely humiliating situation to be in, but at least John Waters will hire me for his next movie. John Waters, man. This guy is going to be one of, if not my favorite movie director of all time. Tapping into an at the time obscure zeitgeist of queer audiences and making disgusting movies that only a mother would hate. And for the record, this is a list of stuff that my mother hates. No matter the opinion you have on him, he's always been a very interesting person to learn about. Always very sophisticated and takes advantage of the fact that he has the title Prince of Puke by knowing exactly what rubs his audience the wrong way. Also about that title of Prince of Puke, yeah, you can't really sum him up better than that. Seriously, for a man as elegant as Waters, his films are beyond disgusting. A sentiment that was even brought up in Alvin and the Chipmunks 4 of all things.
Well, actually, I recently flew next to the Chipettes, and they were ladies.
Hey, don't judge me. I saw pink flamingos.
This was the only funny part of the movie.
We will continue this conversation when I'm back.
Like, I watched Pink Flamingos a while ago during the worldwide house arrest, long after the film's controversy had completely died down, and I was thinking to myself, it's a low-budget film from the 70s, I doubt there's gonna be anything that's going to shock me here.
I'm gonna cut that big fat worm right off.
Oh no! Oh God, not that!
Jerk off just one more time, stud. Just one more time.
No!
Hold him. There, I got it. Cut it.
No! No!
Oh, okay.
And since then, I've become such a super fan of this guy. Like, if you asked me which actor of his starred in every single one of his movies without fail, I would say Pat Moran. Every single time. And to put my concerned mind to the test, I've decided to go through and rank every single one of Waters' feature-length outings, including one where Tracy Ullman suffers a concussion that turns her into the horniest person alive, and Johnny Knoxville playing a bona fide sex god. God, I owe my parents an apology.
Oh, yeah, a tiny thing to know before I start.
John Waters movies are notorious for having the tiniest bit of plot sprinkled throughout it and then just going off on a tangent for the rest of it, so I'm kind of judging his movies based on how well they mix the two. And one last thing to note before we start, if I haven't made it extremely clear already, is that we're only going to be sticking to feature-length films, so Eat Your Makeup is not going to count for this list. So outside of those, everything is pretty much fair game. Let's get it though.
Jesus loves me, this I...
You know how I mentioned during the intro that Waters usually likes to throw in small plots to his films before he gets to the overly weird tangents? Well, his first film, Mondo Trasho, however, that is just nothing but tangent, man. This is a really bizarre movie. Like, sure, it was a pretty huge jump star for Waters' company Dreamland, and it does star most of his Dreamlander proteges that would become an essential part of his career, like Mary Vivian Pierce, David Lockery, Ming Stoll, Pat Moran, and his longtime collaborator, friend, and drag legend Harris Milstead, who you would probably know through his stage name, Divine.
Kill everyone now! Condone first-degree murder! Advocate cannibalism! Eat shit! Filth are my politics! Filth is my life! Take whatever you like!
So, pretty much everybody that turned Dreamland into what it is today. So with all these awesome people at the helm, I should love this thing, but while I don't love it, it is Waters' first feature-length film, so I could kind of give him some leeway for that. And I do appreciate it a lot for being a movie made out of entirely non-sequiturs. And I do love his methodology here, with only choosing a few select scenes to make audible because the whole entire film was made in 16mm at the time. Like, we're seeing the guy learn how to make a movie in real time, so with all that in place, it should be his first well-deserved home run. But this does bring me to quite possibly the biggest problem that I have with the movie and why it's at the very bottom of this list. It did not need to be 86 minutes long. Even with all those bizarre sequences intact, that doesn't excuse how much nothing there is going on. I mean, sure, Pink Flamingos had a whole load of nothing happen as well, but at least that movie's nothing was important to fleshing everything out more. The wedding scene between Edith and the Eggman being a pretty good example of that. Here, there are way too many long shots of people just walking or driving. Just a whole load of that. I mean, with a movie that markets itself as a gutter film, they are sure taking their sweet ass time with showing the gross stuff. This goes on for nearly 3 minutes. Overall, it's an excruciatingly slow mess with zero cohesion whatsoever, but I'd be lying to myself if I didn't love the intentional rawness going for it, and I would watch this over any Mondo-exploitation film in the 60s or 70s any day. Not to mention, this is kind of the patient zero for what I like to call Waters' exploitation era, so if this existed just to give us a sex scene between Divine and a giant lobster, I'm perfectly fine with Mondo Trash Show existing. Also, one more thing before we move on, I don't know if the weird feet acting like the ruby slippers from The Wizard of Oz were an intentional callback to Waters' abandoned film Dorothy and the Kansas City Pothead, but if so, what a pretty neat way of salvaging it. Progressive as well as efficient with media preservation. Just a typical Tuesday for Waters.
Big boobs!
I've always wanted to look into an alternate universe where John Waters helmed the American Pie movies, and now that I've seen it, I don't want it anymore. A Dirty Shame is Waters' most recent movie at the time of recording, and admittedly, I'm kinda split on it. The idea of several people getting hit on the head and transformed into the most sex-crazed suburban town in history is something that you could have a lot of fun with, especially if this guy is top billing, and you have this guy as the director. They're practically perfect for each other. And the tone seems to be a lot more zanier than his other films, more surreal than Female Trouble, more absurdist than Multiple Maniacs, more slapsticky than Polyester, and more satirical with the approach to sex comedies than Serial Mom was for horror comedies. No, really, how could you ever forget this? So, why doesn't this work exactly? To be honest, I think the film's a little too explicit with its sex jokes, to the point where it borders on fetish territory. A lot of this imagery is admittedly very difficult to watch. I know Waters is a weird guy, and I've been perfectly fine with his bizarre approaches to sex in his movies before. It's just that when he decided to do it here, it feels less humorous and more like I've stumbled across someone's illegal role-playing sex tape. I don't even know how much I'll be able to show here because it was that explicit, and I've already reviewed 3 pornos. And the strangest part is that it did shock me. That is until it didn't. This is the exact same problem I had with the 50 Shades films. It's so exploitative with its nudity and sex puns that after a while you start to get really desensitized to it, to the point where it's not really shocking anymore. No joke, I had to watch this movie 3 times in order to get a proper understanding on what I think of this movie. And for something that's supposed to be provocative, it sure is boring. There aren't really that many standout scenes in this. Outside of that weird CGI squirrel and Knoxville's electrifying performance, seriously, I don't care if he's over 6 billion years old now, take me. Almost nothing happens throughout the entire movie. There aren't any clever or funny lines being said, no one really has a personality, and even Tracy Ullman, who usually sparks personality with any time she's in anything, no pun intended, isn't really that funny of a straight woman, and even when she does get the horny knocked into her, her performance felt a little too similar to Divine in a sense, so much that I wanted to pause the movie at one point, and I had Female Trouble in the second tab, an actual movie that used its NC-17 rating to the utmost of its advantage. It also doesn't have to be said that it's also a way funnier movie. Bottom line, Dirty Shame is by far the weakest mainstream Waters film. There are a few fun scenes in there, and I would only recommend it if you're plastered and have a bunch of friends to watch it with, but other than that, low priority.
This one goes out to my long-haired folk. You know when you're eating food or whatever and a single strand of hair gets caught in your mouth? Yeah, that.
Hairspray it. Okay, hairspray. Hairs. Okay, Hairspray was one of the first John Waters films I had ever watched. Well, the 2007 remake at least. But Waters was heavily involved with that version as well, even making a small little cameo near the beginning. Of course, in the most John Waters way possible. God, that's hilarious. So it may be no surprise that I would consider that as the better version, because the 1988 film is, well, still pretty alright. The songs are still great, the acting's still great. I mean, when am I ever going to hate on a movie that has Divine in it?
Could you turn that racket down? I'm trying to iron in here.
The whole film does have a sort of Rocky Horror Picture Show type feel if it was coded in 50s colors, so with all that stacked before it, it does seem like something that would be right up my alley. So why is it only at number 10 on this list? It is an 80s dance movie after all, and there's your problem, it's an 80s dance movie. Yeah, the decade was kind of obsessed with these over-the-top cheesy dance flicks for a while, so much that they mostly felt like they were ripping each other off. Footloose, Breakin', Fame, Dirty Dancing, A Chorus Line, Urban Cowboy, Flashdance, that one Village People movie that I can't remember the name of. And Hairspray sadly isn't the exception. It's not very consistent with going between lighthearted and melodramatic, and oh, how did the 2007 remake say it best?
He's corny!
No, really, what else can you say? Honestly, I don't even know if I'm comfortable with criticizing this one. I've held the remake very near and dear to my heart, and considering that they're both two completely different versions, and I've only watched the 88 one like half an hour ago for this video, putting the two against each other feels kind of unfair, but I did say I was going to be honest here on this channel, so bottom line, Hairspray is by far the least John Waters movie John Waters has ever made, but I can't bring myself to say that I actually dislike it. And it has no James Marsden in it, so automatic 0, it's not good.
Playing Mario Maker with a blindfold on, so I can't see anything.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh. Pecker was the very last film that I had to watch for this ranking, but I couldn't help but to be a little let down by it. I mean, I do like it. One review on Letterboxd described it as a ruthless takedown of influencer culture before that term even existed, and I wouldn't really have it any other way. The acting's pretty good, the cinematography itself is pretty decent, most of the characters are pretty likable, and it's probably the most loving tribute to Baltimore Waters has ever done. As a matter of fact, it was great to see that city again after he straight up abandoned it for 2 movies in a row. But I'm sorry, speaking as a hardcore Waters fan, for a movie about a 35mm photographer being turned into a worldwide sensation, this needed to be weirder. I was hoping that it would go into a more batshit position by the end, but it just never happened. It just feels wrong that next to none of Waters' fantastical trademarks are present in this film at all. Even the non sequiturs are completely absent here. If you ask me, the best part of any Waters film is their surreal absurdism. They're all over-exaggerated satires pushed as far as they can possibly go and are often really fun to put on at parties if you're high off your own ass. The reason why Waters is as revered as he is because of this particular element. You're never going to forget moments like Pink Flamingo's shit-eating ending, Female Trouble's art massacre, Polyester's insane climax, or Multiple Maniacs. Oh, trust me, we'll get to that later. Pecker is so by the numbers for a movie of its caliber that while it isn't terrible per se, it's the least memorable. The only reason I'm putting this above Hairspray is because I like the way the story here comes together more, even if it does get a little lazy at times. Just like me not figuring out a way to end this segment.
But it's opposite day.
It's only a given that the only trinity of trash movie that's appearing in the lower end of the list just so happens to be the only one with no Divine whatsoever. And before you get mad, I'm gonna make this very clear and say that every single film in this list going forward I don't consider as bad at all. As a matter of fact, Desperate Living is actually kinda great. Even if I do feel Milstead's absence here, it does give the other Dreamlanders a chance at the spotlight. As a matter of fact, this is probably the only Waters movie that has Mink Stool as the leading lady, which is fitting because she was the only actor outside of Waters' Dreamland subsidiary to actually land some roles in a few major movies, including Greg Araki's Splendor, David Lynch's Lost Highway, and Jamie Babbitt's But I'm a Cheerleader. Some of the newcomers to the Dreamland subsidiary subsidiary like Jean Hill and Liz Renee, and even Edith Massey taking up a more antagonistic role this time around, are also a lot of fun to watch. The film's also meant to be the solution to fascism, which in itself is kind of hilarious, and the first half hour is a bit of a darkly comedic road rage crime thriller before Thelma and Louise made it cool. I really like that this entire movie is a sort of takedown of queer stereotypes, but I don't know, I can't help but to think that this one drags just a little too much. It gets off to a weak start. The middle's implementations of the aforementioned queer stereotypes, even if it's supposed to be a critique of them, are very difficult to watch. And even if I do like how uplifting the ending is, a cynical part of me can't help but to say that it ends a little too abruptly. Hell, Queen Carla's death is entirely off screen. We just cut to her as a roast pig. And they're cannibalizing her. They're eating the pig, and the Upper Peninsula of society are pigs, so they are rich, so they're eating the rich. They're eating the rich, I get it now! Very subtle, Waters, I respect that a lot. But yeah, even if I do think it's a little unfair to put this up against two of Waters' most beloved projects, out of the entire Trash trilogy, this is the one that I go back to the least. As for the rest of the trilogy, we will get to them shortly, just after a few kinda big stepping stones.
Anybody! Whoa! Hold on now, baby! I'm just not ready for that kind of a commitment!
This was a video I uploaded not too long ago called Autumn Summer. A video that bombed and is pretty much ignored by everybody, but it was driving home the fact that this year has been the least wintry winter I have ever witnessed in my life. When I first woke up and noticed that there were completely no clouds in the sky at all, I thought somebody accidentally spiked my deodorant with LSD.
So, when are we gonna get home?
Right about now. Seriously, the weather is gorgeous over here. We couldn't even get weather like this in July, let alone the months where everything was allowed to be cold. That's why when I was starting to get next to a lot of Christmas ads that morning, it just didn't feel right. It's like living in opposite day limbo nowadays. So that's why instead of popping on a good old-fashioned Rankin Bass stop-motion special, I put on this.
I don't have all day, you know. I'm missing valuable shopping time.
Mother, please, I'll be out in a second.
I don't know why you bother. You've always retained your fluids.
If there's a John Waters movie that I would consider as comfy, it would be Polyester. I mean, I get why nobody would see it as such, considering that it tackles the topics of cheating, alcoholism, and abortions, but as a shock to both Waters fans and the average audience member who's vaguely aware of who he really is, it is done in a way that actually feels sorta believable. I mean, I wouldn't say this is the most subtle portrayal of these topics, this is Waters we're talking about, but it is one of the only projects he's done that feels the most grounded. It's definitely a lot chiller than Waters' other works, even if the Wikipedia plot summary doesn't do this tone justice at all. I mean, look at how nuts this is. Granted, it does have a few crazy moments in there where Francine's husband and the girl he's cheating on her with tries to break into her house to murder her, only to be killed themselves by another couple, but outside of that, it's probably the most uncharacteristic project he's ever worked on. I also once read that this is meant to be a satire of the works of Douglas Sirk, from what I recall. Personally, I've not seen a single one of his movies, so I can't really comment on the accuracy on how well Waters managed to capture the guy's signature style. I'm more of a Bergman type of girl, thank you. But Milstead and Massey did do a great job at playing such grounded portrayals of two people who are constantly being put through the ringer by everybody else they're in contact with. Oh yeah, and I guess everybody else did great as well. There are also a lot of firsts that came for this movie as well. It was Waters' first movie to get an actual rating as opposed to being given an NC-17. It was the first movie of his that got some mainstream critical appraisal, and also one of the only recorded instances of Bill Murray singing, which is of course going to be of equal importance. But let's face it, the only reason you remember this movie is because it was filmed in... Yeah, whenever you manage to catch a screening of the movie, you're given these scratch and sniff cards that you're supposed to use when the supposed number pops up on the screen. A technique that would never be used in another film again until 2011 with the release of You're not gonna believe this. Spy Kids 4, of all things. Yes, a technique that was invented by John Waters was brought out of retirement by the 4th installment of a kids franchise. But if you ask me, that film did it 10 times worse. Honestly, if you ask me, A Dirty Shame would have been a much better movie if you could actually smell the raw ravioli and semen. Honestly, a pretty risky move, especially coming from someone with the title Prince of Puke, but it must have worked for everybody somehow. The film was a pretty massive hit. Screw it, no matter what you think of, well, that, Polyester is still, at the end of the day, a pretty good film.
It'll be just like Grease!
You know what, maybe I just don't like films that take place in the 50s. I know that this was the decade that Waters had the most nostalgia for, but any movie that I saw that took place in the time frame had always been oddly underwhelming to me. But Crybaby does stick out from the rest for one singular reason. The entire film is just unhinged.
Now you put the T in tough. So hard you could have been eating nails for breakfast. But that's the way a woman's got to be these days.
I'd kick a square's ass for you in a minute, Mrs. Ricketts.
I know that there are problems that I do have with this movie. Most of the characters are pretty forgettable, the editing is just bad in general, and we don't even get to hear Johnny Depp sing in this because his voice was entirely overdubbed during the musical sequences. But the writing for this movie is just so much fun that I just don't care. Maybe it helps that it was all entirely written by Waters himself, but I digress. This movie just can't stop being insane. The way everything's paced, the oddest held dialogue, the surreal non sequiturs even managing to sneak its way into the film somehow.
I pay taxes on cigarettes, don't I? And what do I get for those taxes? Happiness? Hell no! I get tuberculosis!
And hell, even Willem goddamn Dafoe is in this. That's right, Thomas Wake is in a John Waters movie. Damn, imagine how different of a movie that would have been if that was the case. He's only here for about a minute, but still, even 10 seconds of Dafoe is too much Dafoe even for anybody. Oh yeah, he also says this.
God bless Richard Nixon!
And it was at that moment that I knew that I have completely fallen in love with this movie. Even if the second act admittedly does start to drag a little bit, and it's pretty much the reason as to why I'm not putting it higher on the list, but besides that, the entire movie just doesn't let up for a second. It's nuts. It's just nuts. I mean, the film has a woman giving birth in her car during a Volkswagen Beetle jousting battle. How can I not love a movie that ends with something this bonkers?
Let me just wash these off. Let's get I look a bit dirty.
Can I say something without making you all mad? I'm probably the only person on planet Earth that would put Pink Flamingos at number 5 on their ranking, but this absolutely doesn't mean it's bad in the slightest. I just think there are 4 other movies that are a lot better. There are funnier movies out there, there are a lot more surreal tangents out there. I've seen cleaner buttholes, but that's besides the point. In a strange way, I like that this is a movie that sort of humanizes filth. Not just that, but it sort of glorifies it as well. As Divine and his utter ragtag band of weirdos who hold the title of being filthy as a badge of honor pretty much only do what needs to be done when there are other more cowardly people who are trying to upstage them. As a meat-loving weirdo myself, I approve of this. I'm sorry that I'm being this vague when talking about one of the most famous disturbing movies of all time, but what am I even supposed to say that hasn't been already? Nothing can be more disturbing than Pink Flamingos. It didn't get its reputation for nothing, you know. Yeah, the house coat was starting to get a little smelly, so I changed back.
You're the best around. Nothing's gonna ever keep you down.
So, the 2010s have been a pretty good decade for killer clowns. I'm not just talking about the killer clown craze of 2016 either, but I'm also meaning Stitches, It, the climax to Zombieland, Mario. Hey, hello there! It's the time for Mario to give you the instructions on how to be a young John Wayne Gacy! Yahoo! But rest assured on how much the world is fearing that the epidemic will also take over the 2020s as well, we shall all rest easy knowing that it'll never replicate the real thing. I am probably the only person on planet Earth who would rank Multiple Maniacs above Pink Flamingos. But can you blame me? It's a movie about a circus freak getting revenge after being cheated on. And it's in black and white, and it has Mr. Roundheels from Eraserhead playing a man who's literally called Straight Man. Don't get me wrong, I still love Pink Flamingos. Without that movie, I never would have had a chance to discover Waters' treasure trove of a filmography. And I 100% get why everyone calls it his masterpiece. As a matter of fact, Marilyn Manson sampled one of the film's dialogue for his song Dogma.
Burn, you fucker! Burn!
But I just think that the rest of this list hold up to me a lot more better. Was that because I used an adverb? And yes, while I do find myself quoting Pink Flamingos a lot more, and it does more with a commentary on serving justice against the wannabe filth, it's Multiple Maniacs that holds up better for me with its beyond surreal visuals. And besides, come on, being weird isn't that overrated. Isn't that right, Schachten von Schockmeyer? Look at this. While it's not funny or anything, it is crazy memorable. There are even people eating tuna straight out of the can. How can I not love this? I can relate. I mean, I will say this, there isn't really that much whack dialogue going on here. As a matter of fact, it's probably his least memorable script outside of Pecker. But it really does thrive on its surreal visuals, making it one of his more unforgettable outings. Like, what is this? A young child dressing up as the Pope? What will they think of next? Wouldn't you like to know? Yes! Yes! Oh my god! We're really doing this now! Ladies and gentlemen, John Waters is proud to present the moment of a lifetime, the performance of film history, Lobster Ray! That's right, everybody. This is quite possibly the moment in film history that you will never experience ever again. Harry Milstead getting motorboated by a giant lobster. What was everybody smoking in the 70s? I know I should be criticizing how much of a crude way it is to end a movie like this, but I don't even know what to say here. This movie has an 100% critical rating on Rotten Tomatoes. So clearly, Waters must be doing something right here. I don't even know what to say about this. This is so unbelievably insane. Something that should never be filmed or put onto anybody's filmography or even their IMDb pages in the slightest, and yet, some majesty of filmmaking comes in and just places that all over the film. It's beautiful. It's certainly beautiful. Alright, I take it all back. This is going above Pink Flamingo strictly for that ending alone. This is Waters' Click. You were pretty standard before, but by God, you really sold it with those last 20 minutes. And let me remind you, we only have 3 more of these to go. God, I love this man. One more time. Masterpiece, I tell you. Masterpiece.
Was this like one big statement on how useless and unnecessary some of your artistic choices are? I am so fucking confused.
I'm sorry. I am well and truly sorry. Let me explain. I get it. I am aware that this is one of the films that Waters himself isn't proud of because it makes him come off more as a hypocrite with how it's written. I mean, Moby of all people is doing the soundtrack. Hello? But outside of that, I adore Cecil B. Demented, strictly because it was a genuine love letter to the type of trash filmmaking that Waters helped pioneer. This entire film is pretty much his version of S.O.B. if it was on steroids. The Julie Andrews boobs movie, that's what you know it for. Seriously, this movie is a lot of fun. The characters are pretty memorable, the soundtrack's great, Cecil is such a fun antagonist, being this passionate indie filmmaker who hates anything that's too mainstream. I mean, this guy was a cinema snob before, well, the cinema snob. I love that whole introductory scene where each member's directorial influences are literally tattooed on them, often even matching their own distinct personalities and approach to exploitative nihilism. I too also want a tattoo of David Lynch on my fingers. As a matter of fact, I already have a few influences tattooed on my palm, my thigh, my foot, my fist, my wrists, my acne. Also, for future reference, Cinema is going to be the name of my autobiography. I don't even know what else to say other than it's just fun. Like, I don't care if the film's flawed, it's just really, really fun. So instead, I'll just move on to the top 2 on this ranking. Also, Waters, if you're watching this, please get me a copy of Forrest Gump 2. I'm only asking for a friend.
Cocksucker, that's what she calls me.
Listen to you, filthy mouth, you fucking whore!
Let's be honest here, you're all probably not surprised that I put Waters' only horror film at number 2 on the list. And I'm definitely guilty of that. In the words of Jack Torrance from Stephen King's #1 least favorite movie of all time,
she's a confirmed ghost story and horror film addict.
This film can go off the rails at times, from the bizarre and sometimes even referencey ways Beverly kills people, to Matthew Lillard just existing, to even the final act taking place entirely in a courtroom. Joker 2, take notes. If you ask me, this is without a doubt the best approach to satire this guy has ever done, with it being about the over-obsession with true crime and the idolization of serial killers such as Jeffrey Dahmer and Ted Bundy. The latter of which Waters himself makes a hilarious cameo as over Beverly's voicemail. Just what?
Beverly, it's me, Ted Bundy, and it's lonely here on death row.
This entire film is just a cacophony of what I love about Waters' movies. They're wild, eccentric, hilarious, surreal. Man, I've been saying the word surreal a lot throughout this video. I don't know how Waters is gonna feel about this. Pretty much the only reason as to why it's not at number 1 is because I'm really bad at hiding my processes of elimination. You all know what's going to take the top spot. Like, would you even be surprised at this point? Skip 10 seconds ahead, we all know what's there. Number 1 is King Star King. I'm just joking. Go to Waters' IMDb page, you'll get it. I don't know if putting this at number 1 is considered controversial, considering that this is in the Criterion collection now. But rest assured, I really want to buy a pair of Cha-Cha heels now.
Those aren't the right kind. I told you Cha-Cha heels, black ones. Nice girls don't wear Cha-Cha heels. Give me those presents. I don't need you to wear those ugly shoes. I told you the kind I wanted. You ruined my present.
You thought Pink Flamingo's idea of shamelessness getting rewarded was on a whole nother level coming from Waters' mind? Well then, you're really not ready for what comes next. Now let me make things perfectly clear. If we are judging this list by what's the most influential of his work, yeah, I would agree with you there. Pink Flamingos would without a doubt be his best movie. But while that film was able to launch Waters into the pop culture stratosphere, Female Trouble was one that proved that he wasn't a one-hit wonder. And what better way for him to celebrate the controversial provocateur title he has today by doing pretty much whatever he wanted. Without a doubt, this is his funniest movie. It's got the tangents, it's got the surreal structure, its budget is smaller than a new house, and it's the movie that got me to look a little deeper about myself. Not in a pretentious way, of course, but more so along the lines of...
Oh, I'm gay now. Huh.
In all seriousness, I'm probably the most confused person on the planet when it comes to my sexuality. I mean, I have boy traits, of course, but I also have a girl's name and my voice sounds a bit feminine at times. Kinda makes sense considering that back when I was still in the object show community, I always seemed to exclusively voice act for female characters. I've also cross-dressed plenty of times as seen in my album covers and my first movie, Brides of Deathstein. I don't know why I've taken this long to mention it, considering that Waters is an openly gay man, but I would like to play this scene for you in full, because, in all honesty, I've never been able to forget about it ever since I saw the film for the first time.
I like women.
But you could change. Queers are just better. I'd be so proud if you was a fag and had a nice beautician boyfriend. I'd never have to worry.
There ain't nothing to worry about.
I worried that you work in an office, have children, celebrate wedding anniversaries. The world of heterosexual is a sick and boring life.
It's almost like reverse engineering on your usual scenario of coming out and having to have to talk about how it might be a dangerous life to lead. But here, they say that it's okay to live that way. It's done in a very nuanced way and doesn't feel exploitative or manipulative. The line, "the world of heterosexualism is a very sick and boring life," has always kind of stuck with me in a way. Pah, what the hell with nuances? What about the non sequiturs?
Include sketches of every outfit I ever wore. Oh, why won't they let me wear a gown and makeup today? Today and all day. My big moment in the electric chair.
Well, coming off the career heights of Pink Flamingos is a pretty difficult and daunting task, especially for a performance as electrifyingly over the top as Divine's. And the character of Dawn Davenport is somehow even more deranged, going down this dark, shameless path of killing people for art, all because she didn't get a pair of cha-cha heels for Christmas.
My parents better give me them cha-cha heels I asked for, that's all I can say.
Like hell, even the phrase cha-cha heels has kind of become a meme unto itself. Like, if you try to look them up on Google, you're probably gonna get nothing but images of Divine. That's how synonymous they've become with this movie. For future reference, they look like this. And do I really need to mention the last 20 minutes at this point? The series of events that comes together here, it's one of my favorite endings of not just Waters' career, but of all time. Davenport finally becoming famous for the most extreme means possible is gratifying to see, even if the outcome's a little...
well, that.
Female Trouble is not number one because it's his funniest or that had a message of queer acceptance that actually stuck with me, but it's the film that made me fall in love with Waters and his increasingly diverse catalog of projects. It's the film that got me to discover more of his oddball works like his novel Liar Mouth. It also got me to listen to Divine's only studio album, ironically titled My First Album, and even got to watch a few of his short films. Hell, I might even give those their own respective ranking list. Say what you will about most of his movies or even the guy himself, if he could describe next to all of them in one sentence, it would without a doubt be ahead of his time. And it's fair to say that we should leave it at that. Or at least for another time if you all want it. Oh yeah, he was also in Seed of Chucky. You don't tell me you're meaning that Seed of... Oh no... Hi again, so before I go, I would like to say thank you for sticking with me for the entire year. This year's season of EMT was extremely fun to work on, and I kind of did follow through with my promises of accelerating with the cocaine levels of my writing, so that's one New Year's resolution sorted out. I also have some music on my Bandcamp, listen to my music, and special thanks to everyone who worked with me this year, whether it be for writing or guest voiceovers, everyone who's commented on my videos for being genuinely really cool people, even the mean ones, don't worry, I never forgot. Thank you to Sam Taylor Johnson for making the worst biopic since Mein Kampf, and very special thanks to you, the viewer, for watching. These videos are usually scripted and filmed ahead of time and take a really long time to come to fruition because I want them to be the best possible project that they can be. So, thank you for putting up with my snail pace uploading schedule. Hats off to all of you. Also, yes, this will be the last video for this year, which means no best to worst movies of 2024 list, but considering that I've been trying to put my life back out of the dead zone for the past couple of months, maybe that's for the best. Anyways, I'll see you in 2025, presuming that we're not all dead by then. You're the best. Bye.